It all goes. All right. So, okay. Welcome, Chaucer, to the Intersection podcast. It's a real pleasure and an honor for us to have you with us today. And let's just dive into it. The way we do it is I'll let you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, and what you do. And we go from there and start talking. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to, man. And I'm happy to be with you all. So yeah, I'm Chaucer Barnes. I'm from the mid-Atlantic of America. I grew up in between North Carolina and DC, or the DC suburbs, really. And I spent my whole life there until right after college. I had this band in college, and I had a philosophy degree. So I was that guy, the guy with the philosophy degree in the band. And, you know, I was 23 years old. I just finished college, and I didn't have any place to be. So I moved to the West Coast. My music director and I decided we both wanted to just play music till the wheels fell off before law school, whatever. And, you know, we flipped a coin between Portland and Seattle, and it landed on Portland. So I pack up, I moved to Portland, and my band somewhat took off locally. I mean, we had all of those great buzzy opening spots that you would want. It was an organic hip hop band, and I just needed a day job. And, you know, I was working in this law office. I hated that. I just needed something to do between 9 and 5, ideally one that had like dental benefits. And I wound up being introduced to Dan Wyden. And I didn't know Dan Wyden was like, you know, the walking god of the whole business. I just knew he was a guy that had his name on the door. And I thought what was on the other side of that door looked cool. I walked into Wyden and Kennedy, Portland, and I looked around and I was like, oh, something cool is happening here. I don't know exactly what, but something cool is happening here. And Dan and I met, and we just connect politic ditto for an hour and a half. And we took a shine to one another. And, you know, I consider myself a writer. I was an MC. And so when somebody asked me what I do, I was like, I write. And long story short, I wound up getting a job at Wyden as a media planner, as an assistant media planner on the Converse account. And the whole kind of quid pro quo with the media director at the time, he was like, look, you're definitely the target. You're who Converse wants to go after. So the trade is, I'll teach you the media business if you use it to, you know, basically lay this brand in the path that you would normally take as a consumer. And that's how I got into business. So spent a couple years media planning, buying, deep in it. And at the time, you know, it was like mid-noughts, like 2004, 2006, somewhere in there. And everything digital, they were like, give the kid the digital thing. Make him do that. Because it didn't, you know, it was a big TV shop, and it was print, and there was TV, and those were the sexy surfaces. And then there were these little banners, and everybody's like, get the fuck out of here. Yeah. Oh, wait, I can cuss, right?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, of course.
Good to go.
So they're like, yo, get this kid out the paint, like, get him away from the TV, get him in that little digital bullshit. And, you know the story, man, like, you know, you learn something, and it feels niche for a minute, and then it blows up, and it was like, boom, 1 year, digital went from 10% of the budget to 60% of the budget. And there were a couple of people around Wyden at the time, especially on the media side, we were young. We had all been told, like, go over there and deal with the digital thing. And so we knew how everything worked. And so it put us in a position where we were like training our bosses on what this all was. And that's how I caught my star in the business, man. I hit a couple big home runs, integrated planning, digital strategy, wore a bunch of different hats. Learned a lot about what was coming, as like we would later call programmatic. And I took that all, and meanwhile, somewhere in there, the band fell apart. So I took that all, and I went to the creative side. And yeah, so I've worn in this business, media planner, buyer, strategy, brand strategist, context director, copywriter. I've worn all the hats.
Awesome. I mean, and to keep at it a little bit. I mean, after Wyden, what comes next? I mean, because I mean, we know each other through Joe, and your work now at Translation on the East Coast. Well, basically, I mean, you guys are all over the place, so you run the place. But actually, how that came to fruition to make you go cross country.
Yeah, for sure. There was this one campaign that came out of Wyden, Amsterdam. It was for World Cup in South Africa. It was called Right the Future. And I watched Right the Future play out in 2010, and I was like, yo, whoever did that, I want to rock with them. Whoever did that. Like, they had the whole side of the building and the shit. And one of the things that attracted me to it was I saw this piece of data that said that there was like a differential between like people who were on the ground in South Africa for the World Cup versus like the global audience. But both of them was staggering. It was like 30% of people over here thought that Nike was an official World Cup sponsor, when in fact it was Adi. And on the ground, like 65% of people thought it was. And I was just like, yo, that's the it. Like, I like that. I like the bully. I like the gorilla pimp aspect of that. Like, you just walk up, you just buy the building. That's gangster. So I found that guy. That guy, his name was John Norman, and he had been running White in Amsterdam, and he wound up on the East Coast a couple of years after that, maybe 11. And he was running Martin. He was the CCO at the Martin agency. And we met, and just like with Dan, we just clicked. It was like, oh, this guy. And so at the time, I was a digital strategist at Wyden. I was frustrated because I was like, I was still kind of in the media department and the strategy department. I wasn't getting my fingerprints on the work as much as I would have wanted. And he just gave me that job. He was like, look, just come over. It doesn't matter what we call you. You're going to report directly to me, and you're going to improve all the work. And I just thought that was like the it. So I went to the Martin agency, and what I liked about it, John Norman is this, if you ever see a picture of him, he looked like Bon Jovi. So he's like, he's got like 14 rings on, his bracelets, shit. And, when you take that, and maybe a lot of your listeners don't know what the Martin agency is, but they're famous for like Geico and Walmart and Pizza Hut and Chapstick, all these big red state brands. And I just thought that tension between a guy that was clearly, a high design, sophisticate with these red state brands, I thought that was just a cool kind of pool to be in. And I went, and, I won't say anything ill about the place, but he left. And once he left, I was like, never mind. I remember there being this one moment, I had this viral sensation. I had made this cat, this yodeling cat. It was yodeling Christmas carols or something stupid. And it was like, whatever, it did like a million plus views unassisted. And so everybody's popping bottles. Whoa, 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 whoa. This is amazing. High five it. And I'm like, yo, this is litter. This is litter. Like, this is what you love? They just love the performance of it. And again, like, I think it's a fine shop. That shop has been turned over since I left. The woman running it today, Kristen Cavallo, is a beast. I got nothing bad to say about the shop, but it just wasn't for me. Because I wanted to be somewhere where ideas that I really wanted in the world were likely to get sold. And so when I started looking for that, my best friend in the world, he had already read The Tanning of America, and he'd been telling me, yo, read Steve Stout's book. And I hadn't gotten to it yet. And then my partner at the time was like, my man, Will Esparza, he too, we were both at Martin together, and he was shopping, and he had been in New York, and he had met Steve. And so he's like, yo, I met Steve. We should go to Translation, and we should cook over there because this guy's really about it. And to be honest with you, I had seen that whole like hip hop mogul trying to diversify thing before, and it never even occurred to me that he took it seriously. Like, I thought it was some like finger gun, like,
yeah,
this guy in the room, get that guy in the room, woo, 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 woo. And I went there pensively. I went there like as a child from the golden era, meeting Steve Stoute. That's just, that's a checkbox. I'm like, I'm gonna do it for the hip hop of it. And I went, but I went like kind of doubting it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're like, I don't really expect this to work out, but I want to know, like that. And I had in my mind, I was like, yo, you know what? He's probably gonna have this army of sycophants around him, this bunch of yes men around him that don't really know the whole thing, and they're not like as deep as I am and all this. And when I get to the office to meet him, he's got some excuse. He's not there. So that's strike one. I'm like, oh, you real Hollywood, huh? Not there, and he's got he's like, my chopper blade broke, and I'm stuck in the Swiss Alps with Rihanna. That kind of thing. And so he's not there. So I start going around. I'm meeting his executive team, and I'm like, oh, see, this is exactly what I thought. I meet his chief creative officer. Again, no disrespect, but he's kind of a zero. Like, I'm like, nah, B, that ain't it. I just was working over here with this guy. This guy ain't it. I know it. And I meet the president. The president is a president. Like, what do you get from a president? I'm interviewing as a creative. And then I meet the strategy guy. And I was like, oh, whoa, it's that feeling. And, that was my first hint that I think, translation at its core is a strategy shop. Or as a strategy guy. The fact that we have to execute flawlessly is just par for the course. But like the strategy guy lit me up. And what he did was, he didn't do it that day, but eventually we developed this little bromance over email. And the strategy guy, he shows me the inside of what would become Made in America. Budweiser Made in America. And he shows me this one slide, and the slide reads, the sum in the center of the slide, it reads, celebrating through music the people who make America great every day. And I was like, yo, what? That's how you sold a music festival, B? I'm rocking with these guys. And what I loved about it, it was like, what it wasn't was like trying to obscure, like just trying to take a beer brand and put them at the cool kids table and put them around some cool shit just because they had really done the crunches. They had really figured out, this brand was built on the idea of Americana. That worked until the 80s. And in the moment Gordon Gekko is gone, like that idea is gone. And they didn't know how to get that in the minds of 21 to 27-year-olds. Like, they didn't know how to interpret the richness of Americana for a young audience who doesn't look to Norman Rockwell to tell them what Americana is. They look to Jay, they look to The Rock. And the fact that they knew to do that they knew to build that on the heritage of the brand, but they were turning it ever so slightly, I was just like, yo, these guys really, really get it. And that's how I wound up at Translation. I came to start a practice called Context Strategy. And since then, I've just, again, like worn a bunch of hats. Today I'm the CMO. Joel Rodriguez has taken over Context. He's turned it into a creative discipline, done a great job with it. And, along the way, we created UnitedMasters, and, clients come and go, but UnitedMasters is here for the long haul. So it's just been a lot of, my partnership with Steve is, we got our ups, we got our downs, but we got more ups and downs. And, I trust his vision, and I'm a co-author of his vision, and it feels good, man. It's we're creating a context in which the people who create the culture really get the credit for it and the financial reward for it. And that's the outcome I always wanted. Since back when I was trying to, pretend my big ass could crowd surf one day.
No, but basically, I mean, that's it's outstanding. And from the outside, I mean, I myself, I have, I follow Steve, and, whatever gig he's speaking at or whatever, anything that he's involved with, I mean, I make sure to follow, because, he's that guy that has that grander vision, but he has some sort of practicality to it and truth to it, which actually makes it, that you say, duh. I mean, come on, I mean, no one thought of it before, right? So yeah, and actually, and a prolific Instagrammer as well. I mean, he's a guy that actually makes sure to get back at you if
that's his preferred mode. I probably got about 6 unanswered emails right now. I'm gonna have to move it over to DM, see if I can get a faster react.
That's good. No, but actually, I'll tell you a story. I mean, the first time I heard about Translation, I think was around the time, the Nets were eloping Jersey and coming over to Brooklyn, and the whole brand building exercise and all, and how because of the relationship with Jay and so on, kind of Translation was the shop that was involved in that. But one of the things that made me admire the work, we've spoken about this several times already, the work that you guys do, especially knowing, at least from the media perspective, how the shop is run. And I remember a post or an article by Fast Company about the majors and minors strategy about how you can empower people by actually allowing them to tap into their own passions and how to translate that. That's actually was the first time I heard the name Joe Rodriguez, and a few years
word?
we
I didn't
are
realize.
connected. Yeah, and understanding that and seeing, this guy's an MC, this guy's, a musician, this other guy's a writer, and I take us a little bit through that and how the shop is made out of, crazy talented people in their own fields, which are crazy talented also for the trade.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy to call it secret sauce because we've been talking about it for 8 years, but like, it's it's look, here's the thing, man. When you set out to lead culture, and that's what we're doing, we're like, brands that lead culture fare better than brands that follow culture. When you set out to do that, you need the real people who really lead the culture in it. They can't be advisors. They have to be the crafters, right? And so the idea was like, there's a couple theaters, there's a couple cultural theaters, sports, music, entertainment, social justice, that are always going to be the places where brands are trying to get footholds in. I would say maybe social justice is maybe that's the last 6 months, you know what I'm saying? But sports, music, and entertainment, that's a thing. And so I don't want the person who academically knows about nightlife in New York. I want the real promoter. I don't want the person who listens to hip hop a lot and really likes it, like it's their favorite thing to consume. I want the Joel who really has to sit down with a blank piece of paper and come up with something that he thinks somebody might want to sing along to, and who's actually done the crunches, really go to the lab and really spend his own money in the studio and with the engineer and getting it right and then figuring out the video, and who has that level of resourcefulness, because it doesn't just make him a master of that topic. It's also the process that you have to do to become that. All of those things pay massive dividends in our business. And, the recipe has just been, what are you a nerd about? What are you better qualified to talk about than anybody else? So irrespective of your position in our organization, no matter what it says on the front of your business card, I want to know, what's the real load-bearing aspect of your social identity? What's in your Instagram description? Because that's what I really want to, when it's time to talk to somebody about Americana or Pittsburgh or service or, nightlife, I don't want to pull the person who the front of their business card says they should know about that. I want to pull the person in my orbit that actually knows the most. And, it's served us well. And like any other organization, as we've grown and constricted and grown and, changed up, sometimes we've lost our focus on that. But right now, today, I can say we really got it. It's important. You can see at the heights of the organization, the people that really rise in it and stay in it, like a Joel, like a Sandy, like myself, they all very crispy about investing in their minors, and being something outside of advertising that qualifies them to help people navigate culture.
How would you define your minor nowadays?
My minor is actually military history. I'm a absolute nerd, every podcast, every book, every movie, everything. And so, I give you a perfect example, people that don't share my appreciation for Toussaint Louverture, or don't share my appreciation for, Patton or anybody else, it can start to drag on them. But what it does for me is I'm able to instantly recognize patterns because, look, I'll give you a perfect example. I had to tell the story it's a story about Gallipoli. It's a battle in the First World War. And the Allies got obliterated in this battle because they didn't follow the admiral. The admiral at the time was Winston Churchill. He was the vice admiral of the Navy. He was a young guy, and he had a whole plan. That plan fell apart because there were a lot of people who were actually piloting these ships who couldn't sacrifice their ships. What he knows is some of these ships got to get sacrificed, and that's fine because the ones that'll those anyway, they were going to be scrap heaped anyway. But what he didn't calculate was that the people on those decks, the actual captains of those ships, they grew up on those ships. And for them, this is the highest aspiration they could ever have. And it was impossible for them to turn off the idea that they were in charge of protecting the ship. So they couldn't use the ship like a pawn. They didn't know how to turn that switch. And in our business, I can tell you, point of fact, that happens all the time. You get an art director that's trained to like defend the idea against any blah, 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 or you get a strategist who's like, spent 20 years or even 6 years developing a certain reputation for like doing this one thing. And then when you tell them to like turn around and do something different or use their power in a way that they had never thought about it before, it's stunningly difficult for them. So as a management practice, I got to think of myself like Churchill, but I also have to think about how I can demonstrate to somebody to think about what their job is differently all the time. And it's just something that, it's a passion of mine. I love learning about it. I love pattern recognition. I'm still an MC at the end of the day. I love learning about references to things that I can use later. And it powers everything I do. I sold Codes of Culture by telling them the story of how the military created adjustable seats and adjustable helmet straps in one shot. Like I told this story from the Cold War to loosen up a room of executives at AT&T to sell a campaign that was really about kids repping their area code, 718 style. So that's how it works, and everybody brings their little, their magic to it. But the point is, like, you can't do it as a tourist, like I never lived in Verdun or Iwo Jima or any of these places. But I've taken it upon myself to know more than anybody else around me about it. And that's how you get that effect. Like, I think we all know that one white kid who like really, really knows the culture, despite the fact that he was born in Connecticut. And if you really log those hours, that value is, it's immeasurable. It's shocking to me that more people don't think this way. They don't even brief teams this way. They don't go, whatever, like, oh, it's the Shell Polymers brief and they're building a new factory in Pittsburgh. Like, let's get some kids in here that know something about Pittsburgh. They don't even do that. They'll be like, well, we need a strategist and copywriter and an art director. Who's available?
There's capacity.
Great.
Yeah.
With they think about it in billable hours, right?
They think about it in billable hours and skill sets. But it's like, there's a lot of soft skill sets out here. And, shame on anybody who doesn't figure out how to unlock the total value of their staff. The way that we've chosen to do it has this cool name, Majors and Minors. But it's not something that we're like, we got a copyright on and we don't want anybody else to do it. I feel like the work would be better across the globe if people thought like this. And we're a fan of that.
Definitely, Luis. Before I roll over to you, because you have the agenda, I want us to also spend some time in talking how UnitedMasters came to be. It is something that, as in the outside, listening to Steve and how that, let's say, his first love in terms of music and and promoting artists and actually enabling artists to reach greater heights. How that idea came to fruition? What was the aha moment, right, for you as an advertising shop being able to actually spearhead that platform?
Yeah. So I was privileged to be. I had just come back to the company. I left the company for a minute, and I had just come back to the company as a partner, at with more of an inside view of everything that was going on in Steve's office. And we had been on this massive new business run, and we won a bunch of stuff. And so he pulls myself and John Green, the guy that I mentioned recruited me to the agency, into his office one day, and he starts talking about Chance the Rapper. And he's like, yo, when you're watching this kid, you realize like everything that everybody assumed you needed, you didn't. And I'm fascinated by that. We used to just have these talks like all the time. We just talk. And he was watching Chance, and he had met him and spent some time with him. And he was just like, he kept showing us pictures of Prince. And, when Prince wrote Slave on his face, and he was like decoding that for us. He's like, yo, this is what he was saying. Like, do you know that the contract is actually called a slave contract? And he's pulling the contracts out and he's showing. And so it started really as what I thought was like an op-ed. He asked us to write a couple, to publish the conversation that we had just had. And so we thought it was going to be like a speech or like an open letter to the RIAA or something like that. And it wound up becoming a pitch deck. Because what we started to, like any other strategist, what we started to peel apart was like, what's the real tension here? And the real tension is that at that time, the music business had turned over so much, and it was so digital first, that the role that record companies played had been completely outmoded. It had been turned upside down. So the value they used to create in the Berry Gordy era is everything, right? He walks into a coffee shop and sees a girl singing. He goes, "You're going to be a star, kid." And he invests in her for 5 years. He buys her sequin outfits. He gets a vocal training. He puts an orchestra around her. And he records her and teaches her how to walk, do a red carpet, everything. And then one day she's Diana Ross. And that was pretty much the thing until let's call it Mariah Carey. Pretty much there. And what happened after that, when everything went digital, was twofold. Number one, there was so much more music to consume that people were choosing their own favorite artists just off of discovering it through some means that had nothing to do with the way the record industry promoted you. And two was most of these people were getting to that point where they had something that was ready for human ears without the help of the record company. So the record company's listening to the music the same time you are as a fan, going, yo, we should get that kid. We should back that kid up. They're listening to the same record you are. So then they come and they throw a bag at the kid. They throw a bag at the kid in order to get the rights, see if there's any more fuel in the tank, if they can get a couple more records out, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But the point is that kid has to mortgage his future for an upfront check so that he can pretend to be something. And that just doesn't make any sense. You mean you got it to the point where Diana Ross in her journey, there's so much money that went into her before she had a record that was ready for human ears. So now you got a kid who's still living at home, who's ready for human ears, and everything forward is pretty much his Instagram, his Twitter, his connections, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And yet you want to take control of that? That's just, no. And so when Chance did it and we were watching him on SNL, when he did that, then it was like, oh, so there is a path. And the moment you see that there's a single path, there's like a shred of daylight, people are going to flood into it. So we started it with there should be 1,000 Chance the Rappers. Today, by the way, now there's 600,000 artists using some version of software today. There's billions of streams, the whole thing. We couldn't even think that big at the time. We were like, we want to make 1,000 Chance the Rappers. And that's how UnitedMasters started. I'll tell you the honest truth. When we first raised the money, we thought it was going to be we knew we wanted to give people ownership. We wanted people to retain ownership of their intellectual property. We knew that we wanted to demystify their audiences for them, like help them really understand and own their audiences, not like have Instagram own it or Twitter own it or all these other people where you got a 1 million person audience and you can only get to 200,000 of them, but like really collect your audience and use them as an army to activate around anything. You might have a tequila brand one day. You might be selling shoes one day. Who knows? But like you should own that audience. Look at Beyonce. Beyonce is as successful as it gets, but she doesn't really own that audience. She can't send everybody to listen to Lemonade a specific record today. She can't email them, text them, whatever. And so we were like, we knew those two things had to be there. But honestly, when we first raised, we were thinking we were going to choose like, yo, that person. We're going to bring them under the tent. We're going to give them, you know, the what's the blue serum from the boys? We're going to give them the ultra shot of these, you know, capabilities that we have, that only we have. And by the time they get, you know, 2-3 years in the record business, they'll be at this stream count. They'll have this kind of audience, and they can launch as many tequila brands, suitcase, you know, luggage factories as they want.
You were still thinking as a traditional studio.
Yeah, yeah. In other words, like we were thinking artists first, but we over there watching. You know, you guys know the story. Like the company was founded watching the Men in Black soundtrack sell more Ray-Bans than records. So we were already thinking of music as the loss leaders so that you could be in some other kind of business. We were watching the Yeezy rise. Like, we know this. This is our business. So we're like, look, man, like, I'm going to take a couple of these people and I'm going to put them in a position where they can have a Fenty, a Casamigos, a Yeezy, a this, or that, or the other, because that's really the longevity. And that's really what your cultural capital earns you. It's the ability to move people. And sometimes you move people to a concert. Other times you might want to move people to buy a pair of shoes, whether they're marked at $60 or $600.
Yeah.
And, you know what, a year in market, we realized like, yo, we shouldn't be like hoarding the tools and just giving them to a couple of people. What if we just gave away the tools? Because that would bring the moment where artists came to expect their masters, came to expect a direct relationship with their fans. That would bring that moment closer sooner. And that's really the win. It's more so than it's, you know, 10 to 100 to 1,000 individuals who have empires. It's really changing that expectation set for an entire generation of artists where nobody's getting jerked. Even if you do go to major label route. Like, you know how much harder it is right now for a major label to throw a bag at a kid, toss him keys to a Lamborghini, to a leased Lamborghini, and get him to sign away his life? It's way harder now than it was 4 years ago. You know, you got people on record, they're lying about owning their masters. That's a coup. And we're not here to put the record labels out of business. That ain't even it. They can never even drink the amount of supply out here. What we are doing, though, is trying to change the expectation set of everybody who's going to participate in the creative economy so that they're not being robbed. I mean, we watched this institutional rape for like 4 or 5 generations. You know, Billie Holiday died penniless. And that just doesn't make any sense. Everything's changed. So everything's going to change. You dig?
That was awesome. I think it's naturally we should segue here to what's happening in the U.S., especially culturally. And since you guys, and not afraid to use all the buzzwords, have the pulse on the culture, we really were interested to know what's your take on you know, the upcoming election, the things that have been happening during this pandemic and actually in the last 4 years.
Yeah, man. Well, I'll put my mind to work. You know, as a student of history, I think one way to interpret the entire timeline of human history, fewer people can do more damage, right? And it's ultimately a story of the power of the individual and the power of very small networks to create outsized consequences for everybody. So if you go to like 1911 and you think about what is like the true amount of damage done to whatever, like in dollars, done to, I don't know, a city who was at war at the time. And then you think about 9/11. There's 8 guys on those planes, 9/11, and they collapsed they created this amount of true value, and they made a whole country spend for the next 20 years on a war. So when you think about 8 guys on planes and maybe another 200 around them, totally like really far away from the world, when you think about 208 individuals being able to create those kind of seismic reactions, that had never been accomplishable in human history. So if you're looking at the whole timeline of humanity, you're looking at more power in fewer people's hands. And all that's happening right now, whether it be the election, whether it be whatever, is the obvious outcome of that. And so these little small networks that are able to put a guy in the White House. Hold on, let me get this right. Yo, these militias are for real. These militias are for real. These little pockets of, I mean, think about how small Black Lives Matter was. You know, you could have probably counted heads. You could have taken attendance and you could have counted it on your fingers 5 years ago. And now it's like really broad movement. And so, you know, whether that's an artist like Lil Nas X, who's able to create a massive, you know, multicultural phenom out of country and trap, or that's, you know, people who are painting a blue stripe on a flag and saying like Blue Lives Matter, or painting a yellow fist saying Black Lives Matter. These things that are grown in these really small pockets can bloom, can become the culture. And, you know, when I look at American politics, it's easy to see why it happened this way. I mean, the culture is atomizing. There's a lot more choice. There's a lot more options. And that's cute when you're talking about music. Like, oh, we got a lot more options in music. You got a lot more options in news. And so if the content you consume creates the reality that you live in, of course it's going to distribute like that. Of course it's going to get like fringy. And there's nothing really to hold us together anymore. And that is why, among other things, music is our best hope. Music is one of the things that stitches us together. I remember that it was this really great, Daryl from Run DMC was saying, you know, music succeeds where religion and politics fail. There's not very much holding us together. And so the more powerful small groups of people become, the more impact they can have on the world at large, the more we're going to see this kind of disruption. It just feels very contextualized by all the history that I know. It doesn't feel surprising at all to me, like at all. It's disappointing in some cases, but it's not surprising.
Sure. Isn't there something to learn though from those small pockets that have achieved this, let's say, level of control or level of influence that and especially the liberal side hasn't acted upon?
The liberal side, I think the liberal side has. I don't feel like the mainstream liberal side has, right? In other words, like, you know, you want kind of a black hat character to be a Democratic nominee so bad you don't know what to do, right? Like, yo, punch him in his shit, son. You kind of wish you had a bad guy too. But no, I think you're right about the American political system, meaning like the Democrats versus Republicans. But I think the moment you step out of party alignments, there's some really radical shit going on, and there's some new takes on the world. I feel like everybody feels licensed to reinvent the world right now. I myself, like, you know, I'm out here in Oregon right now. My wife is an elementary school teacher. My kids are 10 and 5. School has gone kaput. Bro, we're pulling up stakes. We sold our house in New Jersey. We're going to go on the road. We're going to start in Merida, Mexico, study Mayans and rock around, get my kids up on their Spanish, and everything's changing. So, like, you could call, maybe that's radical. Like, here's an ad exec or music guy or whatever, and he's decided at 40 he doesn't need to have a home. I don't need to have a home. You know, I think that's happening everywhere, and as that happens, some of those things get read as radical. There's gonna be a lot of people that rethink the way the schools work right now, and where they get funding from is going to determine whether or not people call it radical or not. But you know, we saw this in the 60s in America. We saw this in the 20s in America. Counterculture, counterculture is culture, and anybody who dismisses it as fringe, all they got to do is wait, man. All they got to do is wait, because you look at Trump. We were laughing at this guy. We were laughing at this guy 6 years ago. It was laughable, and here he is. And so, yeah, I think that's a testament. I think the lesson that brands in particular can learn is, look, you count if you count people's importance based on their popularity, you will almost certainly fail. Because popularity, it takes nothing anymore for popularity to surge. And when I say surge, I mean like surge off the chart. And so if you're just looking around measuring like, you know, who's popping, Steve tells this great story about when he was early in the business and he'd be walking Jay-Z around. And everybody, you know, people were like kind of scared to dip their toe into hip hop at all. But they were like, but if we're going to do it, let's do it with somebody big. Let's do it with like Ja Rule or Nelly, you know, somebody who's making an impact.
Who's made it.
Who's made it in the mainstream, man.
And he's like, yo, but bro, here's what you don't understand. They might be more popular, but this guy actually influences the way that people behave. This guy can get people to change their shirts. You remember when he tanked Mitchell and Ness? I don't wear jerseys. I'm 30. Steve always knew that. And he's walking around trying to tell people like, no, this guy is the influential guy. Those guys are the popular guys. It's different. It's different. And it seemed, I mean, all those lessons are just coming to term right now. So the same people that counted Trump out, the same people, just to stick with the metaphor, the same people that counted Bernie out, because it felt like so far over there, man, it takes a couple weeks.
It's crazy.
I think it's also something to
I remember
say.
A few years ago, we were thinking that the Tea Party was radical and was going to be kind of the end of the Republican Party, or, you know, conservatives and so on. And look where we're at right now. I mean, I bet a lot of people will take that now.
Yeah, man, you can move the mainstream for sure. You can move the mainstream with 200 people. You can move the mainstream. And I think, you know, when I look around, and that's the thing, again, just to go back to this lesson for brands, like, these brands are always looking to aim for the middle of a bell curve. It doesn't exist. It's like, this ain't back in the day, homie. Like, you know, when MASH went off the air, it did like 60% of American households tuned in to watch the conclusion of MASH. When the Clippers and the Lakers come back, it does a 2 rating after a pandemic. So like this idea that there's some like average and that the average is something to even aspire to is crazy. Everything that we're looking at right now is a game of extremes. Everything we're looking at right now is a game of extremes, and the brands don't get that. You know, I don't know what to tell them. I'm like, you'll see. All I gotta do is wait. You'll be a client one day, because you'll see that this like aiming for the middle thing is actually aiming for nobody at all. Because nobody's there. Nobody's in the middle.
No, but if I jump in just quickly, Luke, when I look at these things, this mega trend of information technology and digital that you talked about at the beginning, the reason why your app was so successful is why everybody's now got a voice. It's about the platforms that are available right now, and people can voice what they believe in. And if you start disregarding certain people, then you are the one that's making the mistake. And so in that sense, I completely agree with you. You know, it's like, if somebody is popular by traditional sense of popularity, you're missing the point. It's about people that can influence the small pockets that then become big pockets, that then become bigger pockets, and then eventually make the difference. And it's actually there as you, exactly. I mean,
and that's where that passion is. No, there's no passion in See, that's why like we could talk about it 20 years removed and we laughing at Ja Rule because we seen him dancing around talking about gyros or whatever it was. Or we've seen like Nelly in the Cheerios commercial. But if you go back then, you're exactly right. Like people didn't feel a passion about that person. They loved that record. They didn't feel a passion about that person the way that we felt about Jay. And that's what you're able to discern. And that's what you're really describing. It's like the emotion and the passion and the urgency and therefore the action is all tied up in the people that are not necessarily popular. In part, that popularity is just it's a consequence of something else other than influence. But sometimes they meet up. And so now everybody's confused. But you're exactly right. And I mean, look at it. You know who was hella popular? Jeb Bush.
He was supposed to be president.
The good son.
You know what I'm saying? Hella popular. Yeah, 90-point awareness rating. And he spoke Spanish.
Yeah, he spoke.
Yeah. Look. No, I actually, to translate that to brands, Luis, this concept of popularity and influence to brands, there are brands that we still consider as love brands today. And actually, it's not because of the exercise of brand per se, it's more how the products or services they have make us feel as consumers, right? And nowadays, in this, let's say, environment, which is not only something that is happening, it's fairly global. I mean, we see what is happening now in Africa, or has been happening actually forever in Africa or Asia and so on. It's now we are looking to the brands that we've gave huge amounts of money as consumers and saying, yo, what's your...
We lost
No.
you.
I think he was going to say,
down here.
where do you stand on this?
Let's have this conversation. Yeah.
Sorry, it cut off again. But I think where we were going is we are demanding, and I think we spoke about this on a previous episode, that we are demanding more of the brands that we support with our money. We are asking them, what is your take on what's happening and what's affecting the rest of my life, other than the sneakers or the whatever I'm wearing.
And actually our level and actually be able to be part of whatever change we need to push forward. I mean, that was the end of it.
Yeah. Sorry, I wanted to add before I lose the point is that that those pockets that you talk about, I think that, and when I was mentioning that there's something to learn about, is there's the discipline this in American politics. Some of these pockets have kind of followed a certain discipline over decades, over a generation or so, to maintain the status quo in terms of, let's say, the inequality. I just recently rewatched for I don't know how many times I've seen it, Malcolm X, Spike Lee's Joint with Denzel.
Yeah.
And it's a long watch. It's 3 hours long, but it's a story that deserved to be told in that way. And one thing that struck out to me after the film ended, with that powerful O.C. Davies eulogy, it's something that is still being lived in American society today by all minority communities. And what educated me on the way was that, now that you're talking about these pockets, is that again, you have nobody really appealing to that common sense of, that's not how the world actually works. Let's go for the average. You know what I mean? And it's in the interest of a few to keep it as it is. And they've been very disciplined in maintaining the status quo. And we were talking about it in preparation to this recording, about what the conservative politics have done in terms of the actual packing of the courts and the actual, complete restructuring of democratic institutions in the States. And yet the argument becomes, because they're very good at it, the argument becomes, what are the liberals going to do if they take power? Which is, nonsensical.
I mean, look, I would say that they know it's the fourth quarter. It's the bottom of the ninth. Like, the shit's over. And so, you know, these moves, I think whenever you see, it's like, you know, a star is always brightest, like right before it's going to die, right? It's just like a supernova event. And they know that the ship is somewhat sailed. And so when you see somebody who's willing to get in bed with a white supremacist after years of like not being that, it's not even like well, they are white supremacists, don't get me wrong, but they're not like outspoken white supremacists, but they're willing to line up with one because they know like this is the yardage I can get right now, you know? And I don't know. My best guess is before, better yet, I'll be even more brazen with it. I think before my son, who's 5, is of voting age, I think we'll have a valid multi-party system. I don't think a 2-party system is going to do it. And I think in the next 12 years, we're gonna see the breakdown of like red versus blue. Because I just don't think it can. I don't think the center can hold.
Yeah. And
when you see like a Mitch McConnell who knows he's at the end of his life, he's just trying to get the right thing written on his tombstone. That I mean, we've seen it in Europe. It's not even like it's unprecedented.
I was going to say that. I mean,
yeah,
it's not
just
unprecedented. Across Europe, Spain more recently. Now it's a 5-party system.
Yeah, and look, look, I won't speculate on like what that means for everybody or anything like that, but I will say that's the way it's headed. Because at a certain point, and here's why I said those militias are real. When I say those militias are real, it's not because I like identify with their politics, but their method is exactly what hip hop built, and that's why hip hop has stood the test of time. Because it's got rituals, it's got artifacts, it's got language, it's got symbols, it's got a self-referential. It's a religion. And that's what they've built for themselves. And so whether kids are born into it or get like brought into it or whatever, what have you, that's going to be around. By the way, like, not for nothing, a lot of the strains that you see right there were informed by a guy writing in 1936. So you can tell it's not a flame that's going to go out. And, you know, the closer they get and the closer other parts of this get to really articulate in the cultural commons, like what they want to have happen. Right now, like defund the police is a joke, but it ain't a joke to the people that are really thinking about it.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is they're going to take over certain municipalities. They're going to rethink it. It's going to really happen. And then we're going to all see. And, you know, I think education is up for grabs. A lot of it's going to fracture. And again, I don't know what to do about that, but I know what to tell brands because of that. And I don't see a single brand aiming toward the middle that's really holding on and really thriving as a result.
And as we approach the close, actually, that was my question: is what do we tell brands to fight the fight? You know, to stay on. And you just said it. You know, not to aim for the middle.
Yeah, for sure. Don't aim for the middle. Every pop hit is a cult hit first. That's lesson 1. Book 1, chapter 1. Every pop hit is a cult hit first. So find the people who are going to really, again, like rest their own identity on this thing being true and place your bet on them. Stop trying to like rise above. I don't know if you guys, this probably didn't hit your radar, but there was a company called Shea Moisture here in the States. This is a black girl hair products. And they were doing really well. And then they got some money and they were like, yo, we're going to go super wide. And so they did this big launch campaign with all these commercials and whatnot. And in the commercials, like 3/5 of the women are white. And black women lost their minds. They were so mad. Because they were like, yo, how are you looking at
them like me?
Yeah, you know what it was? It was like the Say My Name. It was the Say My Name song. You know that song? Say my name, say my name. No one is around you. Say, baby. That's how they felt. They were like, yo, all these many years, you've been rocking with us. And then when you get ready to go on TV, you got Bridget and Claire and all these people. So like.
And Karen.
Yeah, you got Karen's on the screen. And so like that level of being for someone that's ever important. And it's not as easy to do for really mature companies that already have a client base. But look, they're going to go through it. They're going to go through it because the fact of the matter is, how about this? When Roger Goodell said Black Lives Matter, he looked like a hostage, didn't he? In the basement, like he looked like somebody was off screen, like
real. Yeah.
with a written statement in front of him.
Yeah, but like as a result of that, when you see something like that happen, you go like, oh, okay. There is anybody who doesn't say it after this guy said it. What he did was he moved the middle line. Like, okay, now that he said it and he didn't mean it, now you gotta say it. You don't gotta mean it to say it. So now you gotta say it if you want everybody to stay alive. And that constant negotiation of like what's true, that's really hard for big organizations, diverse organizations. But maybe the future, just like the future, in my opinion, of our politics is much more small and boutique. Maybe that's the future for brands.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you. You're not immune to nothing, man. Like if Carnegie Steel can go under, so can you, Pizza Hut. You dig?
Yeah. I was thinking exactly the same thing. Now there will be, and you can see that now, new brands coming up with that ethos that, from the beginning, not having to choose later on.
Just be for someone.
Yeah.
And by the way, you don't even have to choose. Just be for someone. You don't have to choose the demographic boxes. You don't have to choose to be for Black youth from Chicago. You don't have to choose to be for Black women with hair or whatever. Like, you can set who you're for through your products, through your advertising, through it all. And it doesn't even have to visit any of that. But just don't be for everybody. Because if you're for everybody, you're for nobody.
Yeah, Patagonia. I'm a big fan. A brand that believes on change and does what they say they will do. And I read the book. From their founder, which is like a Bible of mine at the moment, especially since I work in the energy industry, and it's kind of let's just get through it. But definitely a brand that you look at and you think they're in it more for the money, and they have a very nice niche audience that they cater to, whether they're mountain bikers or surfers or whatever that is. All of them are Patagoniacs, which is I thought it was brilliant. So
it's they've been doing it. As a matter of fact, that whole category, I think, like outdoorsy, REI killed it, a couple of years back. I think Patagonia is killing it right now. Yeah, it's like it's just brimming with purpose. And the super obvious thing to say is, everybody aspires to be Nike, but nobody behaves like Nike. Like if anybody laid the blueprint for what it means, it's Nike. Like they're still doing it. It doesn't mean it's like, as sharp as it was in 1988, but it's still there. I mean, these guys are like, who they're for, you know what they're about, you know what the idea is all the time, and you're either in it or out of it. And news cycles come and go, and Cambodian kid camps where they make all of that. You know what the idea is, and the fact that everybody admires and respects them and feels like they know their story and yet won't behave like them, that's on them. I respect that brand. It didn't take them putting Colin Kaepernick up on the sign for me to know that they would. It wasn't surprising at all. It made all the sense in the world. And the fact that they moved first, and then they were ready with the here's how you burn our Nikes for everybody in Kansas City who wants to burn our product now. Here's how you safely burn Nikes. I mean, it just shows you at the highest echelon of the game, the biggest company in the world. It's not obviously the biggest company, I'm saying, but big like that, known all around the world, everywhere. You're still forced to choose. And if you're in the middle, that's where the armadillos get mashed out, in the middle.
That's awesome. I think if the guys don't have any other question, I think I would leave it there. This was awesome to talk to you and dive into this. V, you wanted to say something?
No, I mean, I would have had more questions, but to be honest with you, Chaucer, I've been left speechless with many of the things that you've talked about today. I'm a history buff myself, so to see how you connect, 18th, 19th, 20th century history in today's circumstances for me was like an eye opener. I was like, yeah, that's exactly what we need to do more. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for the inspiration. I've taken a lot today with me and to how to build my career. I mean, I aspire myself to get in your position one day. So that's been a great motivational aspect for me today.
That's outstanding, man. Thank you for saying that. How about this? Very much appreciated conversation. Right, every time you expose me to something new, you got to trust it's like net new. Like, I'm super interested in EMEA. This is gonna be the next stop for me and my family. So making early connections, knowing like-minded people is always welcome. And yeah, I appreciate y'all's time, man. Let me know how it goes. If I can help punch anything up or clarify anything, even if we got to hop back on. I can't promise the same sweater, but if you need to do some punches, just let me know.
Yeah, cool.
Oh, we'll see how it goes. And thank you for the time. And sadly, my connection was really subpar today. But that's the time we're living in right now. So, but Luis will make it work somehow. Definitely for sure, and definitely we would like to have you on board down the line and actually kind of revisit from wherever you are in the road next time.
Yo, it's a go, man. I'll talk to y'all soon.
All right, bro.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Bye.
Wow, good to meet you guys.
This episode is brought to you, as always, by The Connect. The Connect is Ray de Luis Baez. Follow the Intersection podcast in your favorite podcasting platform. Leave us a review and share it with a friend. This will really help us be found by more of you interested in the topics of sports marketing and deal making. Until the next one.